Linus Reynolds lasted until April 19th, 1863, dying in Lexington, Kentucky. Somehow his body was returned to the Union Army, and he made his way to Windham for his final resting place. And that's what marks Linus's grave up in the cemetery. And he wasn't the first Windham boy to lose his life. That would be Sanford F. Yale. The Civil War began with an attack on Fort Sumter on January 10th, 1861. Did I get that? That date doesn't sound right. April. Thank you. I caught it. Remember, I caught that. I can see these Civil War buffs taking me out back. Okay, before the end of that year, 20-year-old Sanford Yale, who lived on the township line hard onto Trumbull County, volunteered for the 42nd Regiment of the Ohio Volunteer Infantry. Along with other Portage County boys, he was assigned to Company F. The commander of the 42nd Ohio was Colonel James A. Garfield, who eventually would become the President of the United States. The regiment was mustered in on October 16, 1861 at Camp Chase, located west of Columbus on the National Road, which is today U.S. Route 40. It was as close as Sanford ever got to the war, because 2 months later, the day after Christmas, Sanford Yale's body was returned to his hometown, a victim of an unknown disease. Today he lies buried under this simple poem. Sweet soldier, thy country did thee call. It needed the true and the brave. Why did this evil befall thee? Why shrouded thy form in the grave? Obscurity cloaks the next one to die. His last name might be, and forgive me, I was an English teacher, so I'm going to do some spelling. His last name might be R-A-M-A-L-I-A or R-A-M-A-L-L-A. His first initial, we know, was R. He was 22 years old, and he enlisted for 3 years in the 19th Regiment of the Ohio Volunteer Infantry, organized in New Lisbon, Ohio, which in March of 1862 was attached to the Army of the Ohio and marched towards Shiloh, Tennessee. And that is where this shadowy Windham soldier apparently died on the first day of the Battle of Shiloh, on April 6, 1862. As one Union soldier recalled, no soldier who fought at Shiloh ever spoiled for a fight again. Now, who was he? Not one soldier named Romalia or Romola served in the Civil War. I searched record after record, and that name is just not right. There was a family named R-A-M-A-L-I-E, Romalee, who lived in the furthest southeast corner of the township, according to Civil War era maps. By 1874, that property was listed to a family named Romalee, R-O-M-A-L-I-E. 4 different spellings, and I could find nothing about the man. But someone in Windham knew him, and knew him well enough to have his name, correct or not, enshrined on the monument, along with his age, his regiment, and the date of his death. So we don't know anything about this man with 4 last names, but the rest of them left stories behind. Ben Adams, in his late 20s, signed up with the 14th Ohio Battery, organized in Cleveland for a 3-year enlistment. During the Civil War, an artillery battery consisted of 6 field pieces. They were the thunder that accompanied the musket fire of the infantry. His battery arrived at Shiloh late on the first day of the battle, stabilizing the Union lines and convincing Confederate General P.T. Beauregard to delay his offensive until the next day, by which time more Union troops were in place, repelling the rebels in the bloodiest fight of American history up to that date. But Ben Adams was not up to celebrate. He'd been shot during the battle. He returned to Windham to recuperate, at which time he would return to the Army. The majority of battlefield wounds were septic, though, and Ben survived only 2 more months, passing away on June 22, 1862, and joining Sanford Yale in the quiet Windham Cemetery. Henry Howard was 18 years old when he joined the 7th Regiment of the Ohio Volunteer Infantry in Ravenna on April 25, 1861. Now, this was a 3-month regiment based on the misguided belief that the war with the South would be swift and decisive. He trained at Camp Dennison at Cincinnati, and his term of enlistment expired before he set foot out of basic training. The men in the 7th Ohio were then asked to enlist for 3 years, and Henry was one who stepped forward. With 3 months training, he was probably better equipped for battle than any other Windham boy up to that point. The Ohio 7th began working its way through western Virginia. The boys did well. In fact, on March 23, 1862, they gave Stonewall Jackson his only defeat of the war at the First Battle of Kernstown. Continuing east, they arrived at Culpeper Courthouse, Virginia, where on August 8th they marched 8 miles in oppressive heat towards Orange Courthouse. It took 6 hours to march those 8 miles, and along the way, several of the boys died of heat stroke. At a local landmark named Cedar Mountain, the boys met the reinforced troops from Stonewall Jackson once again. 300 men of the 7th Ohio fought on that field, where Jackson won the first battle of his Northern Virginia campaign. Only 100 of those 300 escaped unscathed. Henry Howard was not one of them. Henry's name appears on a regimental monument at Woodland Cemetery in Cleveland. He's not buried there. He is not buried in Windham. And as we will hear later, he wouldn't be the last soldier in his family to die in the war. Luther Bingham grew up right where the Renaissance Center sits today. He was a 21-year-old looking for something bigger than tiny Windham. He didn't want to be in the infantry and be perpetually on the march. He didn't want to have to drag cannons around. Luther could ride a horse, so the cavalry was what interested him. He joined the 2nd Ohio Cavalry in Cleveland on August 22, 1861. He started out as a private, but in less than a year had been promoted to the rank of corporal. And excitement loomed for Luther. The 2nd Ohio had been sent to the Wild West, to the Indian Territories and bleeding Kansas, to Fort Scott, which was already the scene of much regional nastiness. If you've ever seen the movie The Outlaw Josie Wales with Clint Eastwood, you know the bitterness of the Western frontier during the Civil War. Now, Luther probably looked forward to his adventures in the Indian Territories with eagerness. He never got to see action for his commander, General James Blunt. He never got to taste victory at the Battle of Old Fort Wayne. Sometime in the month after his arrival in August of 1862, Luther Bingham died. There were no battles near Fort Scott in late September of 1862, which could have contributed to his death. So we can only assume that he had traveled over 1,000 miles to get sick on his arrival. His body never made it back to Ohio. In the Fort Scott National Cemetery lies a Windham boy, willing to serve his country and wanting a taste of adventure while doing it.